Welcome,
Yep.
everyone. Today we are here to be talking about real-world scaling. And I'm with one of my favorite founders, David, who is going to tell us his story and why partnerships actually play a huge role in the world of healthcare. But before we go into it, David, tell us, how did you start with this company and what made you even start in the first place and where you're right now in the company development process?
Thank you, Lucy. It's a real pleasure to be named as one of your favorite companies, especially knowing how many you've worked with and supported over the years. So that means a lot. Yep, I'm David, one of the co-founders of Capsule. We have built the Bloomberg terminal of health data, and we are on course to build the go-to place for all health data around the world, starting off in Africa. And a little bit about me. I was a scientist who then quickly realized that I was being wasted in the lab because I don't talk to people. I was just looking at reagents, and I was doing genetics at the time. So spent a lot of time just looking at different base pair combinations. And I realized I needed to be doing something more people-focused and more business-focused, but I also need to make my parents proud. So I went into consulting, as many people do. And then while I was doing that, I supported pharmaceutical companies, primarily around market access and regulatory affairs, and pharmacovigilance. And then that's where I had my first exposure to healthcare on a global scale. And one thing that was a very small topic that I covered, but it kind of sparked the curiosity that eventually led to Capsule, was when I was hearing about the African market, that it's growing, it's going to be interesting at some point in the future, but it's not worth investing into right now because there's a lack of data and things are still very nascent in that market, to say the least. Cutting a very long story short, I then went into tech and I went to work for Axiom, which is the world's first technology-driven AI company, the first technology-driven legal company. So they brought a mixture of people, processes, and technology to law firms and to in-house legal teams in enterprise clients. And that's where I really learned about the leverage of technology and how to get large enterprise Fortune 500 companies to adopt technology in a way that is comfortable for them and also scalable. So my interest was always in healthcare, and I thought, okay, I now know how to get big companies to adopt technology. I have a background in healthcare, and this is the part which, upon reflection, I realized was a mixture of both hubris, arrogance, and naivety as a 20-something-year-old. And I thought, you know, the data that exists in Africa, we can make it exist so that African healthcare can start receiving meaningful investments. So that was the idea of Capsule. I managed to convince a couple of my closest friends, one from childhood and one from university, to join me. They both had relevant backgrounds. One was a software developer that worked for Big Pharma and worked with global insurers, etc. And the other had a healthcare background where he studied preclinical medicine. He also went and won an award in AI development. So I felt like, okay, this is us three together, we can definitely solve this huge problem. And then we kind of dived head first into creating Capsule. And upon doing that, I then realized where the hubris and arrogance comes in, because every assumption we had was completely wrong. We then realized we can't build a venture for Africa while sitting in London. So we had to move in order to do that. And we found the right opportunity in the Health Tech Hub, which allowed us to move from London to Kigali to then start building on the ground. And that's where we realized, okay, what we're building needs to completely change because all of our assumptions were off. And then we pivoted to our current business, which is data aggregation, because what we saw was rather than there being a lack of data because there's no digitization on the continent, it was the actual opposite problem where there was no information on Africa because the data was spread across hundreds or thousands of different vendors. So we thought, why, instead of us building one more software, one more program to try and capture data, why don't we build the infrastructure that can combine the data that everyone else is doing? And that's what we do now. So Capsule currently is in 24 African countries. We aggregate from over 74,000 health facilities. We have more than 80 million patients across our network. And that's what we do now. We're able to take this information to actually advise our clients on where the opportunities lie. Where are there a peak in demand for products or a peak in the number of conditions that could be treated? So yeah, that's a quick blitz on myself and Capsule.
So David, your work is, I mean, genuinely, and I know you since now many years, but genuinely your work is so inspirational, and not just for other African founders, but founders around the world, because connecting electronic health data, or basically data, and then digitalizing it, probably the second step, and then connecting it, it's one of the largest challenges around the world. And the case is in point is Switzerland, where you'd imagine that probably one of the best health systems in the world, in brackets, well, in quotes, the best, would have the best connected EHR systems, but it doesn't. It's like less than 3% of connectivity, which creates huge issues and duplication of effort, additional cost for everyone involved. And who is paying in the end is the patients. So kudos to your work. Please keep up the good work. But let us ask you now a question which I guess many founders are thinking about. So in the beginning of the incubation stage, obviously you start with some assumptions. Then you go into acceleration, which was some of the work you did at the Health Tech of Africa, getting kind of the right product market fit and all the rest of it. What's the difference then between acceleration and then truly scaling for you? Because I feel like you're truly now in the scaling moment. But what was that pivotal moment that really you can describe for other people to understand? When do you know that you're going from acceleration to scale, and what are the prerequisites for that to happen?
Yeah, so I love to use analogies, and I tend to speak in analogies. So forgive me for doing that a lot during this conversation. But the way that I think about starting a business is very similar to starting a fire with your bare hands. So the first thing you need to do is get the ingredients, you need to get the timber, you need to get the shavings and so on. You need to make sure it's dry, which essentially means you need to get the right team together, you need to get in the right environment, and you need to make sure that you have enough to start doing the work. Because if you don't have the right team, you're not in the right place, all the work you do is for no reason. Similarly to if you try to start a fire with some wet wood, you're never going to get a fire, no matter how hard you start rubbing your hands together. So that's the first step. The second step is you actually need to get the spark. And the spark is what happens when you engage with that first customer that really validates what you're building is valuable. And it's only after you get the spark going and you get the small fire, that's when you can start adding everything on and get a sustaining fire. And I think building a startup is very, very similar. You have to focus on getting that spark in the initial phases, which is not scalable. It's not, it's never going to be the end product, but it needs to validate the core assumptions that make your business work at scale. So for us, for instance, the spark was one, that it's possible to get health data that is spread across many different places into one place, and two, that there's someone who would be willing to pay for that aggregate information. Once you can prove those two things, no matter how small the scale is, then you've kind of gotten the spark where you can add more of the timber on top of it and blow on that fire. So yeah, I'd say for any founder starting out, you really have to write down all of the assumptions that your business have and the one or two things that need to be true for your business to work at scale. And for us, the one thing was one, that it's possible to get health data that is spread around into one place. and two, someone would be willing to pay for access to that one place. If those two things are true, then the rest of the business works. And that's kind of how I like to think about.
Thank you so much.
Scaling is just, yeah. No, go ahead.
Thanks, David. This reminds me of a conversation we had a while back when we were doing this masterclass together, and you spoke a little bit about the choices you did back then on your business model. That in the beginning, you really said to yourself, "I'm not going to start day one going after investors and funders and like many people are spending their whole days just fundraising." That you decided to start with the core, which is your actual business model, the revenue model behind it. What did it take? Did it take a lot of, how should I say, hustling? Did it take a lot of partnership building? How long did it take for that to actually be true as part of your assumption testing or hypothesis testing?
It took a bit of everything. So in terms of hustling, the hardest thing to do is get someone to pay you for what you're doing. Funnily enough, as hard as fundraising is, it's easier than getting a customer. So what we focused on doing is really getting the customer, because then we realize the moment we know we could do that, then we have a certain level of confidence going into every meeting that we're in, every investment conversation that we're going into. The second thing on your point on partnerships is you're never going to know from the outset who your ideal customer is, but someone you know may know the person. So especially in the very early days, you need to experiment and get as many different users on board to test what you're doing, to see if they like it, to see if they're willing to pay. So our original assumption was that it would be governments and hospitals themselves and the producers of the data themselves that would be the primary customer for knowing how their data could be useful when compared to similar companies or similar peers. We had assumed that if you're a hospital, you'd want to know what the other hospitals are doing and what's working for other hospitals, so then you can improve your own processes. That didn't end up being the case at all. They didn't want to pay, they didn't care. They just wanted to be paid for their data. And most of the times, they're not even to be sent to finance to do. So that was a huge learning for us. What we learned was that the actual customer was from a different industry than we had originally assumed. And that is where having a network and partnerships comes in, because when you speak to other founders, you speak to other organizations, they can give you a perspective that you don't have, saying, oh, this potential person could be interested, or this content would be interested, or I know someone who can help you or who can give you feedback. So I'd say that was what was necessary, and we had to do it with literally everyone within our network, everyone in our network's network, trying to get them to get feedback on what we were doing. And then that's what eventually led to us getting our initial customers, which was actually through our network. So it was a founder who knew me, who he was contracting at a company earlier who had a problem with data in a particular country. And then he heard about what we were doing and he knew what we were doing. He's like, oh, are you able to help with this situation? Which we were. And then that was sort of a large customer and we were able to grow from there. So you really have to use all the tools at your disposal.
So David, sorry, I don't know if it's my internet, but just to make sure I heard correctly, which was the industry, which was your first big client? Can you share that? Or maybe I didn't hear specifically the industry or the name.
Yeah.
If it's public, of course.
Yeah. The first big client, I can't say their name, but they were actually another large consulting group, which was supporting a pharmaceutical client.
Okay,
so
okay, got it.
When we were able to, we were able to see the large consulting group and how they were using the data and then who they were using it for, we were then able to learn, okay, these are the industries which care about the type of data that we're collecting.
Okay, that totally makes sense. Talk to me a little bit about partnerships. What kind of role partnerships play right now in the stage in which we are at this moment for your business? And maybe not the traditional partnerships. Are there any types of partnerships that you're doing or that you're considering, which you are probably on the surface level, like not the first thing coming to mind?
Mm-hmm. So there are different types of partnerships. So the first, and I guess the core one for Capsule, is our data partnerships. So anyone who is providing us with data that we can then transform and help commercialize, where they get a share of that revenue, that is our traditional data partner. That's kind of the most straightforward type of partnerships. Beyond that, there are the scaling partners. So if we're going for an opportunity that is in a new country or has a specific focus area in a disease or in a geography or something specific that the client is interested in, we then need to identify who are the partners that can allow us to tap into that new area, that new country, that new system, and those are our strategic partnerships. And those could be similar in that they are hospital groups or insurance or similar, or they could be other health tech companies which have a big presence in that country or in that region, and so on. And that's our way of approaching partnerships to enable more strategic moves into newer markets and to enable us to sell to a wider range of customers and clients or service a larger range of requests. And then the final one is more of the institutional level partnerships. So these are partnerships which give us access to the top tier organizations, institutions that have a lot of influence, particularly around health policy and the government side. Those are our strategic partnerships that just get us in the room, get us talking with, influencing, having conversations with very influential people, whether that be on the Ministry of Health in the local countryside, or if it's on a trade bloc or the African Union level, that is the type of partnership.
It's very interesting because, to a certain extent, I kind of see a huge amount of similarities with some of the work that we do, which is connecting the dots, right? So connecting the dots so that there is value in the end of it, which is what you guys are doing, ultimately connecting certain types of dots. I'm using analogies as well. But dot connecting is also linked to trust, especially when you're dealing with data. How do you identify, or what's important in your personal due diligence of finding out the data partners? Because obviously you might find amazing health tech startup to partner with, or another sort of like a small healthcare provider, but how do you ensure that actually the data that you receive, which then you bring forward to your customers, is actually high quality and is trustworthy? How do you actually vet the relationship? Do you have a process, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, we have a mixture of processes, both technical and human-based. So I'm more on the human-based side. I leave all the technical stuff to my team. But just to cover the technical side, we have some benchmarks that we've developed in to see the data quality, to see the completeness of the data. We also go into how the data is collected. So go into the different schemas of the different data sets, what type of partners or customers they work with, or they fit into the customer's flow. So typically we go for private sector vendors because we found that private sector is most reflective of reality because they need to track where their money is going in order to survive. And in order to track where the money is going, they need to track the healthcare that is being delivered. So those base assumptions lead us to think, okay, the most reliable data is private sector data that is captured around the financially relevant information. And that's our base assumption. But then when we are deciding our partner, we go into the actual data that they're collecting, where they sit in the workflow, and those are all factors that are considered when we're assessing them. From my side, which is more on the human element, is very much the vibe or the energy that I get with the other founder, because I'm usually engaging with them directly myself. And one of the nuances of Capsule's business model is that where usually you have a business that is liable for things going wrong, when dealing with data, and particularly health data, it's the executives who can be personally liable, personally. So if Capsule for mishandles data, in some cases it would be me personally that would be having to go to court or even go to jail. So I really have to put my on to the partners that we are dealing with, so I can assess whether they're handling processes in the right way. With my technical team to make sure that the data and everything checks out. But I think, I believe I'm a very good judge of character. I've had the most incredible friends, and I've never had an incident of someone betraying me or being underhand or things like that. So I've been very blessed to have really good people around me. So I trust my intuition when I meet another person to say, okay, this person, I don't get the energy that they're the type of partner I want to work with, or this one, yes, I feel like I can trust. So it's not very scientific, but it's my approach.
Hey, it's all about pattern recognition, and you probably, people call it intuition. I call it pattern recognition, and following your gut. No, I completely agree with you, and it sounds great. Talk to me a little bit about Synergya. So I invited you a while back, so now it's been probably 2 months or so. What was your perception when you joined, or what is, according to you, the value that an infrastructure for scaling such as Synergya can bring to founders around the world who are looking truly to scale, not just accelerate, but scale their businesses?
Yeah. So when I first heard about Synergya, I had a very rudimentary and I'd say simplistic understanding of what you do. So I thought it was a platform to allow companies to do mergers with each other. So while that is part of what you do, I think my simplistic view made me miss on some of the actual value that it provides. So at the time, I was like, well, the company's doing fine. We don't need to merge with anyone. So like, I don't think there's a lot of alignment there. But as I spoke to you and you explained the opportunities, particularly around getting, using the partnerships to enable you to sell to a larger audience or to bigger customers. At the time, we had I think it was a $25 million opportunity that we were working on, and we knew we were subscaled in order to win this opportunity. So then it was like, oh, okay, if the whole point is to allow me to work with others so that we're big enough to go for these, I literally have a $25 million opportunity on my desk, which I think we could be big enough for if we get the right partners. So that was like almost immediately I saw the value there, was able to connect with a number of companies and put together a proposal, which we have submitted. Now, as is the case with many multi-million or tens of $1 projects, they take their time. So it's still being worked through the review period, etc. But we wouldn't have been able to even put ourselves forward for that opportunity had we not found the right partners through Synergya, because we needed a certain level of scale. And with us joining with some of the companies we identified, we then had the scale to be able to submit. And similarly, we've been able to identify many other multi-tens million, multi-deca million dollar opportunities that we feel that we are in position for. And yeah, having Synergya there is very valuable to say, okay, we need to hit this scale. Maybe we can find a few other partners to work with so that we are in a position to put ourselves forward.
I find your example probably the best one we've ever had. 25 million on the table, a real partnership opportunity, and here you go. You didn't need to spend like 6 months just going to events and talking to 20,000 people. You just did it in 5 clicks, and you find partners who maybe are qualified to go along with you. So thank you so much for sharing. So David, as soon as you win these 25 millions, I'm waiting for my champagne.
My fingers, toes, prayers, everything.
I'm Prayers, man. No, definitely. I mean, we'll feature you if everything goes well. For sure, you're gonna be our superstars, showcasing some of the biggest impact, because that's the point. And what we want to do with Synergy in the future, which is actually in the next few months, we're building Synergy Ventures, is bringing this kind of funding opportunities, some of which only exclusive to our members, so that, you know, in your case, you were qualified for a very specific tender, but we want to make sure that there are more of those opportunities out there. If we're talking about institutional financing, if we're talking about collaboration with big pharma, with big medtech companies, whatever that might look like, that actually the options are there, or maybe something in between, you never know. So we want to surface the best scaling partnerships to our corporate, philanthropic, and institutional partners, and they ideally find what makes sense for them to work with or support. Now, from you, David, what can others help you with? If you have one big dream in the next, I don't know, 3 months ahead of you, I like short-term goals. In the next 3 months, what could be one big thing that you wish for yourself in Capsule, except a vacation?
Yeah, but a vacation is too much to ask right now. If I could find a clone of myself, that would be my number one. Because yeah, right now I've been having to manage so many things across different time zones, different countries. We're currently going through the expansion. But in terms of partnerships, what we really want is, we want to know who is really doing the work on the ground. We want to partner with anyone who, and what we found is that many of the companies that are doing significant work on the ground, they're not the ones which are on TechCrunch. They're not the ones in a lot of media. They're often unknown companies which have a good customer base and good reputation, which are actually delivering and collecting the data that we need on the ground. So if I guess my dream is that all of the best companies that are delivering health services digitally on the ground across the continent start reaching out to Capsule, rather than my team having to find them and outreach and do all of that. So I want the Capsule name to be out there and respected enough so that anyone who's in the space who thinks that they have useful data can start reaching out to us and building that relationship as well. And then we can all start winning together a lot sooner.
I think you said it better than me. So that's your call to action, you guys. If you heard this podcast or video stream, your opportunity is on Synergya. You can go connect with the team of David and maybe find yourself some fantastic multi-million partnership. And with this, I want to thank you so much, David. Well, still waiting for that champagne when it comes. And we'll continue our conversations after we get some more updates from you in the next months. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you.